Hey, how are you doing? I see you're back in the garage.
Yes, I am. And this time I started my setup earlier. So I was able to
Right,
get a better place for the camera and I have an extra light. I had this weird shadow on me last time. It really bothered me.
right.
And you can see the Jeep better now,
I
which I think is
know.
important.
And it's not like crooked.
Look,
It's
it's got a it's got a hood on it now.
uh-huh. And it looks like you got it like the front clip fitting pretty good.
Oh yeah, it's all mounted now. The support beams, I don't know if your JK has these, but the YJ, CJ, TJ, they all have these support beams that come from the tub out to the top of the grill that kind of hold it upright so that
Uh-huh.
even if the fenders aren't there, it kind of holds it up. I figured out where to get them mounted. So now the thing will actually sit there freestanding without even the fenders on because the fenders aren't on right now because I'm still trying to figure out where to
Oh,
cut
that's
the
right.
hood for the
Yep.
high clearance fenders. The fenders are here too. I don't know if I showed them.
I don't think so.
Hang on a sec.
He's showing us the fenders. Oh, those look really good. They look they look similar to some of the ones we have at TNT.
So this is the whole fender. It's just this tube.
Oh, it's just the tube. You don't have a little very cool.
That's you know, hold on. I'm nowhere near the mic. You can probably barely hear
I
me.
can no, we can hear
Except
you
for
pretty good.
now.
Yeah, we can hear you okay.
I'll just put it over here where I'll trip over it halfway through the show.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, that
It'll make for a good
is
video.
yeah, right. When I fall over. Um, the idea is that there's no more fender to like hit anything
Right.
because the trails at AOAA. I mean, I can't show you one of my other fenders, even though they are laying here. Both fenders are like crinkled up because it's really easy to clip a tree in that park.
Oh, yeah, I remember doing, like, 20-point turns to
Yeah,
get
and especially
around the
when you're
trees.
especially when you're guiding because you don't have someone in front of the follow, you don't have someone to look at a tree for you. You really have to know the edges, and sometimes when you have too many things to pay attention to, it's really easy to bump a tree. So, yeah, my old fenders are kind of kind of beat up. So these will be nice. They give a whole bunch of extra tire clearance, and they obviously don't have a fender there to get in the way.
Well,
But
I
I have to
know
do. Go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say at AOAA, um, there's certain trees they can't cut
Mhm.
down. So you're because of the whole
Yeah,
reacclimation, right? Is
I
that
don't
the
know
word
if
for it?
if they're as picky about that anymore, but it used to be that if you cut down a tree that was more than a certain diameter and it wasn't very big, right,
Mhm.
then you were in some trouble.
Right,
But that was right after the park opened up. I don't know if that's still the same.
right.
And I don't. Let me be clear. If you have permission to cut down a tree in the park,
Correct. You
you
can't just
can't cut down
go
trees normally.
but as a
Yeah.
park, they
Yes.
couldn't. Even if
Yeah.
they
So
were making new trails, they had to
as a
leave certain
trail
trees.
guide, I was involved in a lot of trail clearing and trail even maintenance and even creation, right? So
Right.
um, I had to be familiar with those rules. I forget what the number is anymore, but they had like a half a piece of PVC pipe that was the right diameter, and whenever we went to cut down a tree, they'd put the pipe over it. Nope, too big. I can't take this one.
Wow.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know if they're as strict anymore because now the park has proven that they're not going to abuse the land, right?
Correct.
The EPA is the one that put that guideline in place,
Uh-huh.
and I think now that the park's like, what is it, over a decade old now?
I'm trying to think of the first time I went. It has to be.
The first time I went was like 2011 or 2012, but that
Was it that
was
far back?
well, that was because I had a friend who was friends with the people starting the park up. He lived in the area, and they were trying to get people to come out and see the place. Like this was a year or two before it opened, just to sort of get a feel for if people were going to like it or not. So I got to go see the park before it was open officially. It
Very cool.
was a whole different place then.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think last year was a decade. I think last year was 10 years.
Wow. God, how time flies, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty crazy. So what do you got going on, Tammy?
Well, not a whole lot. This company Headzrest, Heads Rest, reached out to me and wanted me to try out their little covers for the headrests of your Jeep. And if you go to their website, they have different designs, but you can do custom make. So I got the Minnesota Vikings, the big ship. It's purple, so it
Of
kind.
course.
So yeah, they're pretty. If you're into stylizing the interior of your Jeep, add a little personal flair.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, it's not like it's going to help you on the trails or overlanding or at the mall,
Nah,
but
some people will give
well,
people a hard time for caring about that.
correct.
Whatever.
So to each his own. And then another company just reached out to me this weekend, tactusgear.com. They have a folding flip carry in your pocket knife. They're going to send me to try out. And then I spent all weekend. Didn't get anything done that I should have gotten done. And because I bought this Frameo digital picture frame, I
Yeah,
just think it's the coolest thing on the planet.
they can be addicting.
Yes. Oops. But anyway, I'm starting to put all my family pictures on here. But I'm going. My sister has one. She has over 14,000 pictures on it.
That's a lot of pictures.
Yeah, I can't just dump mine because there are people that I don't really want to see in my living room flashing across the screen. Oh, look, there's my ex-husband. Oh, look, there's
I
50 pictures of Ben on the soccer field.
I once so both of my parents have one of those frames, and they give us both, me and my wife and my sister and her husband have access to upload pictures to it, so that
Yep.
whenever we're like out at a sporting event with our kids or whatever, we can upload it to their frame, and then they have it show up in their living room, right? So I have this picture that I found on social media.
Oh,
It's a
geez.
it's a squirrel wearing a full suit of armor,
Uh-huh.
and the caption above and below it says, "One day you swerved to miss a squirrel, and the squirrel has not forgotten. The squirrel now has a life debt to you. Someday, in your greatest time of need, the squirrel arrives."
Uh-huh. And here he is.
So I put that on both of their frames.
So you can share the QR code or the special number code. And like I shared it with Ben and Michael, but they probably like, oh geez, mom, quit texting me. But they could upload pictures
Yeah,
through an
yeah.
app to my photo frame. I mean, wow.
It is pretty cool. It's a
So
weird world we live in where
it is.
we can't afford a pound of hamburger, but we can
I'll go buy a Frameo picture
we
frame.
can send pictures across the internet
Uh-huh.
to our
Our
loved
family.
ones' living
Yes.
room.
Yep. For sure. So yeah, and I'm only on folder 2010.
You've got a
So
bit to go through there yet, Tammy.
so it's probably like another 3
'Cause
weekends.
and if your digital picture collections are anything like mine, each year they get, like, exponentially larger.
Oh, totally.
Because you use the camera that much more and more and more every
Right.
year. And then eventually it's in your pocket all the time,
Yep.
right?
Yep. So I'm not gonna put G pictures on it. It's just gonna be my boys and me.
Yeah,
So
I've avoided putting Jeep pictures on my parents' frames as
uh,
well, although it's really tempting.
yeah. So
It's like an extra kid,
yeah, oh, I
you
know,
know?
it
I
is.
mean, it
I
probably cost me almost as much as one of my kids
I probably have
over the
more
years.
more pictures of my Jeep than my
That could be
kids,
true.
but don't
That could be
tell them.
true. And other people's Jeeps? Yeah, can't forget
Yeah,
that.
of course. So that's the extent of my life. And I was super busy at work today because everybody's getting sick. So
Oh, yeah, it's that time of year. This whole
yeah.
winter has been bad with illnesses.
And we're supposed to be getting blizzard type weather here shortly.
That's supposed to be done. Stop with
Now
that.
I know it was like the spring this week, and
Yeah, it was nice this week.
so but
Well, this week it's cold again.
so snow, wind,
That's fun.
ice. Yep.
That's fun.
So
I've been on 2 business trips to Vegas this cold and flu season, and I have not gotten sick.
knock on wood. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been on 2 airplanes too.
Yeah.
I went to California and Tennessee. I
Yeah,
think
but
the reason we're
it's not just the airplane for me. It's like the flight there, because obviously it's really easy to get sick on an airplane because you're all cramped in a
right,
sealed tube in the sky for
and just
5
walking through the
hours,
airport.
or the airport, right? But then usually when I'm on a trip for business, it's at some kind of a conference, and my job is to talk to people. I might see 1,000 or 2,000 people face to face, in
Right,
a 3 or 4 day span, right? It's almost
right.
impossible to not get sick.
So the people, well, Mary is sick, but her grandkids were sick, and she was watching them while they were sick. So their
Yeah,
parents,
that'll do it.
so that, yeah.
The dangers of children.
So stay away.
Stay away
So
from.
I got to turn this frame around because
Aren't
my boys
don't
keep popping up.
don't you work in marketing for TNT? You're not supposed to tell people to stay away.
Oh no, I meant Mary. Mary, stay home. No, people come. We are so unbelievably busy. And then this other Patriot Diesel, they do a lot of diesel work, but they bring their trucks over and we do the alignments for them. And they have been slammed.
Yeah,
People are, fixing their vehicles. And it's not just fixing their vehicles, they're putting on tunnel covers and lifts and air lifts
Hmm.
and new bumper grill guards and steps. And people they're spending their money.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
You
So,
know.
and I know they say when the economy gets tight, people don't go and buy a lot of like new cars and stuff. They just try to keep their current
Yeah,
vehicle
yeah,
going.
but this is different than just keeping their current vehicle.
Yeah,
This
no
is
lifts and new tires.
modifications.
Yeah.
That's like stuff you don't
So,
have to spend on. So yeah,
right.
that's interesting.
So
I guess that's a good sign, though, right?
it is. It's, job security.
That, or all these people are very foolish.
Yeah.
Let's hope that's not it.
So, or they all got their tax returns back early.
That is probably more likely. They got
Yeah.
their tax refund.
So anyway, that's
Yeah,
me.
cool.
So I see you're watching some Netflix, huh?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, I did get some work done on the grill, which is one of the reasons I wanted to be down here. It's like I said, I got the pieces lined up. I have the fenders are ready to go in. I just have to figure out how to cut the hood. But I'm really happy with how it's coming together. You probably can't see it in the video, but the hood, the TJ hood, has like a
Right.
different curve to it than the YJ grill, which I
Yeah,
knew was going to be a problem. I have to figure out what to do about it now that I'm this far.
you can kind of see it a little bit there on
Yeah,
the
there's a
ends,
gap
right by the headlights.
right here,
Oh, okay. Yep.
and then on the sides here.
Yep. That's
see
what the
there's a
ones
little
I
bit
was
of a
looking.
gap?
Yep.
And that's now the wheel of my little wheelie chair is stuck on something. Oh well. All right. And that's just because of the more rounded shape of the TJ
Right.
grill. So I could at this point get a YJ hood and see if that fits any better, or I can try to make this fit. I think I can make this fit. I'm already gonna be cutting the hood up. So what's a few more cuts to try to make it fit, right?
Right. Right.
I'm hoping for the best. I'm not a body man, so it may look terrible when I'm done, and I may have to get a new hood anyway.
You try.
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. What's
Yep.
the worst? This hood has to go to the scrapyard, and I have to get a different one. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Are TJ
But
hoods hard to come by?
I don't think they would be. But I have a
Okay.
friend who told me he has a YJ hood. He's just
Uh-huh.
halfway across the state, but at least he's in PA.
Right.
So I could drive out and meet him and get the YJ hood from him. Because if I can't make this TJ hood work, I won't make another TJ hood work. I'll go get a YJ hood
Right.
and hope I can make that work. Then I may run into problems with the curve of the hood at the body end. That may be different. I don't know. And the hinges, do the hinges line up? I don't know.
You got to figure it out.
Yeah, there's
I'm sure somebody somewhere has done
that's the
this.
thing. Not a lot of people have done this. Not a lot of
Really?
people have done a
Okay.
YJ conversion on the TJ. There's probably a good reason for that,
Right.
which we'll talk about in our main topic, by the way.
Right.
But yes, I also picked up a TV show. I don't know. At the risk of getting political, I'm going to try not to get political.
We will just talk
A
about the
lot.
show.
I've heard a lot of people that say they are concerned with, I'll say, the current climate in the United States, comparing it to 1930s Germany
Mhm.
before the uprising of Hitler. And um, I had no frame of reference. Like, I learned about World War II in high school, like all of us did.
But who
Uh,
remembers that?
well, not only that, like, I don't remember the details. They didn't go into a ton of detail because, they only have so much time to teach you about all these different world events
And you
within a
just
given school year,
right.
right? So they give you like the important stuff that you really need to know. Like, hey, there was this war. It involved a lot of people. It was bad. A lot of people died. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, those are
Right.
kind of the highlights I remember from World War II. But I didn't know a lot about like what led up to that. What was the time between World War One and World War II like? What made Germany and Hitler like lose their mind and do what Hitler did? Right. So I was trying to find a show that went into that. And there's a couple documentaries out there, but this one was a relatively recent documentary on Netflix called Hitler and the Nazis, Evil on Trial, I think is the subtitle. It's really good.
Mhm.
I mean, if you're at all interested in history of that era, they go into like the whole first episode is about, where was Hitler born? What were his parents like? Um, uh, why did he end up in the military service? Like what were his aspirations in life? He wanted to be an artist. Like, I think I vaguely knew that, but it turned out he wasn't a very good artist, so he
Mhm.
couldn't get into college. He couldn't get into an art school. But that's how he ended up in Vienna because he was going to go to art school there. And then when World War One kicked up, he actually dodged the draft in Vienna to go to Austria to
Mhm.
join the military because he didn't want to be in the Vienna army because he thought they were on the wrong side of the conflict. So he was actually in World War One as like a messenger, right? And then that kind of started his military career, which I don't want to. I could sit here all night and talk about some of the interesting stuff I
Right.
learned about Hitler and Germany and the things that led up to World War II. But it's a really interesting show. If you've got Netflix, go check it out. It's like 8 episodes, I think. They're about an hour
Mhm.
apiece. I've watched most of it in 2 sittings. That's how good it is. You know, if you
My
like
ki
history, if you don't like this kind of history, there is a really hard to watch episode about the Holocaust. So I'll warn you up front that that one's, I mean, there's a
Oh,
lot of
I'm sure.
atrocities there.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind.
My kids were fascinated with World War II. They were obsessed with World War II. And then my youngest son was fascinated with tanks, and he loved drawing all the tanks, the Russian tanks, the German tanks, the American tanks. And he would always doodle in school, and so he was drawing a Russian tank, and he put the swastika on it,
You
and
got in trouble?
he got in big trouble. He was like
Yeah.
in elementary school. He had no
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
I'm like, so
I can understand that. I can
yep.
I can understand both sides of that. Him not knowing and the school probably not reacting well to it.
Right. Well, he also got accused of sexual harassment because him and this little friend were being silly, and they said, "Oh, Madison's drawstring," because she was a girl standing up in front of class, "looks like a boy's private part." And the teacher said, "What are you laughing about?"
That's
And
that's what qualifies as sexual harassment nowadays.
apparently he was 3rd grade.
This is exactly the sort of humor I expect from third graders.
I know.
I
And when 2 little
don't know if
boys
that says something bad about me.
and when 2 little boys are laughing, you don't ask them to tell the whole class what they're laughing about.
Oh, right. Yeah, let's
Uh-huh.
traumatize the whole class while we're at it.
Right.
Not just the one little girl.
Anyway, sorry. We digress. This is an off-road podcast, not
It is. It is.
not a school podcast. Anyway, so where were we?
You had a
Oh,
news article we can talk about.
yes.
Then we can get into the main topic.
So I won't spend a whole lot of time on it, but I just once again, I don't know these car bloggers, these car writers, these automobile people. They always like make me laugh when they start reviewing and rating off-road vehicles.
Yeah.
So because they have no clue, and the things they use as pros and cons are just kind of silly to me. Anyway,
And
it's an article out of Top Speed.
the other side of this is whenever I read anything on the internet nowadays, the first question I ask myself is, did a human write this?
Right.
Or did they just ask an AI to spit out something that looks convincing so
Yes.
they can fit their quota for the day?
Yes. And that's what people are doing now. They
They
are
are.
just, and I'll be honest, I go to AI and I have AI help me write my blog. But mine, I personalize it. I don't just write, "Hey, write me a blog on oil changes."
Yeah.
No,
Look,
you've got to.
I've spent an entire career like wrangling computers to help humanity, right? Whether it's from like connecting people across the globe to sending email messages back and forth to like hosting websites for people, like
Right.
I get it, right? This is just the next phase. So using an artificial intelligence to help you do a thing, to help a human do a thing, I'm not so upset about.
Right.
It's the wholesale just like give me blog articles about this topic, that topic, and this topic, and then they just put them right on the blog and call it a day.
Correct. And
Like that's
that's not.
garbage.
No, you shouldn't be doing that. And I think Google and all these search engines are rewriting algorithms to track that and
So
not post those as high in the rankings.
I'll try not to derail too much because have an article to talk about. But I heard I think it was NPR Technology a couple days ago. They were talking about this exact problem,
Uh-huh.
how people are generating articles from AI and then putting them up on the internet, and some of them aren't factual, and they're
Yep.
just like garbage.
Yep.
Here's the big problem though. Do you know how an AI gets trained?
From the internet.
Yeah, they point it in some cases at the whole internet, and it just starts
Mhm.
ingesting data, and it
Mhm.
makes like relations out of the the words that it finds and the context of the website that they're on, and that's how it builds its model, right?
Yep, it's
Uh, so
scary.
so what happens if you start feeding an AI believable but incorrect AI generated information?
Yep.
It just gets worse and
Yep.
worse and worse and worse, and it's like this downward spiral.
Yep.
It's like, I don't know, reusing your dishwater, right? Like I'll clean all my dishes and then somehow like strain my dishwater, and it's kind of clean, but it's not quite clean, but I'm going to use it again. No, don't do this, people. I'm just using it as an example.
Right. It
Eventually that
is.
dishwater is just like black.
Right.
That's what the internet's going to be in 20 years. Maybe less.
Yeah, it is. It's very, I don't think people really understand how dangerous this can become.
Yeah.
But
So anyway,
whole other
top
podcast.
top
Yeah,
10
top
off-road
10.
SUVs.
Well, these are
Bulletproof.
top bulletproof reliability. So
Bulletproof.
the Ford Expedition Tremor
I'm
was
gonna wager
10.
I'm gonna wager that 0 of these SUVs are literally bulletproof.
No, they're probably not. It's a
Yeah. No, I know.
clickbait headline.
I know.
So the Ford Bronco Raptor was number 9, and they give them a reliability rating.
Yeah.
It's like the Raptor 77 on 100. And then it gives you a little description, some powertrain specifications, and then the pros and cons. The link will be in our show notes so you can read it for yourself.
Yeah.
Toyota Sequoia
See
TRD
see where
Pro.
your favorite SUV lands on the list.
I know, that's what I'm curious. And you know what's interesting is the Tacoma's not on here. I don't think any of the Toyotas are on
You're
here,
right. There
are
was a
they?
Toyota at number
Oh,
like
the
8 or 9,
Sequoia.
wasn't there? Yeah, the
The
Sequoia.
Sequoia. But to me, that's not really,
I have no
anyway.
idea what platform the Sequoia is based on, but I
Right.
imagine it doesn't share a lot with the Toyota Tacoma.
Land Rover Defender 110X is 7.
There's a couple Land Rovers on the list, wasn't there?
Yeah. The Jeep Wrangler Rubicon is number 6. Sorry, the other one was 7. This is 6. 80 out of 100. So then they give, all the powertrain information. And the pros is the Wrangler 392 Final Edition isn't final.
That's one of the pros.
That's a pro.
That's not even a Rubicon.
Yeah, 6-speed manual transmission is still offered. Unrivaled off-road capability.
Unrivaled.
Yes. So then cons: lacks on-road refinement, noisy at highway speeds with any top, and the Wrangler 392 costs 6 figures. Okay. So are we talking about the 392
Yeah, also not a Rubicon.
Rubicon? Right. Like
The
I don't know.
392 doesn't have the Rubicon package, does it? It might.
I
It
don't.
does.
I don't
I don't think
know.
it does.
But anyway, it never mentioned the 392.
Yeah.
So anyway, then the Land Rover Range Rover, Land Rover Range Rover. Then number 4
Well,
is the
see, but like, look at the cons for that one, for example.
that's
Expensive, even for
even
its
for its
class.
class.
Third row space is limited. This
Uh-huh.
is a con. Like,
I know.
you've got a third row. Like, congratulations. Have you seen the second row in my Wrangler? It barely fits a
Exactly.
dog.
Right. And then the
Disappointing
pros.
gas-only PHEV efficiency.
And then the pros, opulent interior. You are rating vehicles for off-road bulletproof
Yeah,
reliability.
opulent interior is also, in my opinion, an opinion, not a
Right.
not a fact.
Jeep Grand Cherokee 4xe Trailhawk is number 4 with an 80 out of 100.
Yeah, so now this makes the whole list gets thrown out for me. Because aren't all of the 4xe models like stricken with reliability problems?
Yes.
That's what I thought too.
Yes. And then the Chevy Tahoe Z71 is number 2 or 3. Subaru Crosstrek Wilderness number 2.
Now, Subarus do have a good reputation. I don't know if I'd call them a bulletproof off-road vehicle though.
Right. Well, they do embrace tread lightly approach to off-roading.
Oh,
so
well, that's good.
there you go.
Because your auto manufacturer is the important thing there, not the
Mhm.
driver.
Ford Broncos. I know. Oh, we're in a Subaru. We're not going to throw our trash out the window.
Subaru drivers are better.
Right.
If it comes down to it.
And
And
then
the number one, I mean, this is ridiculous.
Ford Bronco Sport with Sasquatch package.
Like the least manually SUV on the list, minus the Subaru, maybe.
So, to me, this article is silly, very not, I don't know. It's just, and that's what, and this is just one little snippet of an article in this great big world of internet. So I'm sure there's articles out there about refrigerators that are like this or
Yeah,
whatever. So, just take everything with a grain of salt.
we recently replaced our dryer because our 15-year-old dryer, the heating element went for the third time, and I'm like, I'm done. And searching for a dryer, I ran into the same sort of articles where you could tell something felt off about them. They just felt like, one, you get the review sites that are all about giving you Amazon affiliate links, and that's it.
Right.
And then you get the review sites that appear to be generated by a computer.
Yep.
Or that just regurgitate facts from the manufacturer's website.
Yep.
So, yeah. I guess you have to go by Consumer Reports anymore to get a good review.
So, yeah, just, when you're out there on the internet, just take it with a grain of salt and
be wary.
I think word of mouth,
No, honestly, what you should do if you're on the internet and you're not sure, come find the Off-Road Insiders podcast and we'll set you straight.
Correct.
Offroadinsiders.com. Find us where you find podcasts.
Yes.
See how I worked that in, Tammy? That's like
there.
skill.
That is definitely.
But seriously, folks, if you're watching us live, make sure to hit the like button. If you're watching us on either Jeep Mama's channel or my SWB Crawler channel, you should look up the Off-Road Insiders podcast on YouTube. And there's links on offroadinsiders.com.
Right.
Go subscribe over there because we're doing this cross-channel thing, hopefully temporarily, until we can get enough followers on the main channel. So that we're not cluttering up our channels with the same content you can see over there. So go check it out over there because someday you might not be able to find it on our channels.
So today's topic.
Yeah.
We need like a little drum roll. Is that copyrighted?
I need, I don't know, something. I don't know what I have on the soundboard.
A little segue.
Push the button, Frank.
How's that?
That's good. Push the button, Frank. Frank's back in the studio right now.
Yeah.
Pushing all the buttons for us.
Pushing the button.
Yeah. We don't pay him a lot.
We'll see. If any of our viewers get that reference, let me know.
I didn't.
Put a comment or something. It's from, I'll say it's from a TV series. It's the best I'll say.
Oh.
If anybody gets it, leave a comment or send us a message on social media. I want to hear about it.
Oh.
I'll play it again.
Push the button, Frank.
Push the button, Frank. All right. So our main topic today, and this kind of came out of the fact that I'm in the middle of this long running project behind me. And I figure there's a lot of people in the off-road space that probably find themselves in similar situations, right? The winter rolls around and you're like, boy, I really need to get that new thingamajig done on my
Right.
off-roader that I've been putting off. Maybe it's not such a big thing. Maybe it's like you bought a lift kit you were waiting to install and you've got instructions to follow and all that stuff. Or maybe you're about to embark on some crazy custom project like I'm doing here with the YJ Grill. Managing a project like that can really be overwhelming, especially if you don't already have that skill because you do it for a living, or if you don't work in an industry where you're expected to do stuff like that, or some people just have a natural talent for it, I guess. I struggle with project management. I have for a long time. But having done a few of these things myself and having worked in an industry where being able to deliver stuff on time is definitely a bonus, I've learned a couple of tricks. And Tammy, I don't know, how much project management stuff do you do, whether it's Jeep related or not?
Well, I mean, I feel like I'm pretty good at organizing and managing projects. I did a lot of stuff volunteer wise for
Mhm.
projects at my son's schools and in Boy Scouts and that kind of thing.
You had
Um,
deadlines and stuff when you worked in TV
oh,
too,
and
didn't you?
TV news. Well, we had daily deadlines. You had to have a
Yeah.
news story done by 5 o'clock.
And that's got to
Um,
be like the ultimate
yeah.
in pressure. And
Oh, that
I'd
was
imagine
such
it's
an
got a
adrenaline
similar
rush. Yeah.
I'd imagine it's got a similar flow to it, right?
Yeah. And
Identifying the things you need to get done and getting them
yeah,
done and getting done on time and
because you have to have a whole 30-minute and sometimes 2 or 3 30-minute newscasts. So you start in the morning and, I love I thrived on that kind of stuff.
find all the things.
Uh-huh.
And in those days, you had to make sure that they were at least as true as you could prove they were, right?
Yeah.
Not anymore. It's
Don't
just like,
have
ship
no,
it.
it was like that back then, so not to the extent it is now,
Okay. Okay.
but yeah, and I even like at TNT, like we're doing National Go Topless Day. We're having this big
Right. Yeah.
event. It's like a
Organizing an
project.
event. Similar
Right.
thing.
Similar thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess like to sort of frame things, right? I mean, a project, whether it's an off-road vehicle or a deliverable at your day job, or whether it's like that renovation you wanted to get done in your kitchen, right? There's phases to it. There's
Mhm.
steps that you need to identify. And what I like to do is I take those steps and I identify them as something more like a goal. Now, you don't have to use like hokey terminologies like goals and progress indicators and whatever. You can call them
Right.
whatever you want. You can make a list on a piece of cardboard if that's what makes you feel happy. But
Right.
the important thing is take the project and break it up into phases, like with the YJ grill, or maybe these axles that I've been working on, right? Um, I would call that project in phase one right now. I'm still prepping the axles, right? Phase two is probably going to be something like get get gears and lockers installed and
Mhm.
have the axles painted and prepped and ready to go under the Jeep, right? And then another phase might be identify what kind of suspension I want to put under the Jeep to attach those axles. Do I want coilovers or coil springs? Do I want long arms or mid arms? Or am I going to stick with short arms? Am I going to do, crazy stuff with tire clearance, right? And obviously I am. I showed you those fenders earlier, right? But that's another good point. I'm doing that in preparation for the size of tires I'm going to have to put on when I run these 60s. Because if I put a 33-inch tire on a Dana 60, how good am I going to do off road, right? I have less ground clearance than I do now. Not going to be a real benefit. And then, of course, it's, install the axles and the suspension. That might be another phase. And once that's done, then you got to make sure you got all the drive lines connected and brakes work. And you get my point, right? Identifying these goals or steps or whatever you want to call them and getting them organized, figure out what order they have to be done in. And now you have things to work toward, right? If you just pull your Jeep in the garage and start turning wrenches and don't really think too far about it, um, you're eventually going to come to a point where you're like, wow, my Jeep's in 1,000 pieces and I never considered this one thing that I'm facing right now, and I don't know where to go from here. And that
And
all that does is make it more stressful.
and that's kind of the same thing. Not necessarily to do one big Jeep build, but just your overall Jeep build. Like
Yeah,
maybe 6 months, like today, oh, I'm going to put rock sliders on it. Oh, 6 months from now, I'm going to add a lift or, you know,
right.
but think through it in your head like, oh, I can't really do a lift if I'm going to keep this or whatever they
Or
may, or
you
I'm
know,
going to
my goal is 38-inch tires.
correct.
How much lift do I need to clear 38-inch tires?
Right.
Minimum, right? Do I want to go higher so I get more suspension flex? Do I want to go lower so I have a lower center of gravity? Start thinking about those things before you start buying parts and turning
Right.
wrenches.
And even like a lift, it's like, does this lift have adjustable control arms?
Right.
Because when
What
you do
else? Yeah, the snowball
correct,
effect is in.
correct,
What else do I need to make this lift functional? Now, a lot of lift kits today are very complete kits if you go to the right
right,
place, but a lot of them aren't. Um, First lift kit I bought was for my 90 YJ, and it was like springs and bushings. That's it.
right,
Nothing else was accommodated for. I needed shocks. I needed like the track bars wouldn't go back on. I had to either take them off or find brackets for them. The sway bar links were too short. There were no sway bar disconnects. It was like a very incomplete kit.
right. We had a lady bring her truck in the shop. It was a 2019 Ram, I think, if I remember right. Anyway, she was in Kentucky, and all of a sudden, she couldn't drive anymore, and her CV drive shaft, right? Yep.
Mhm.
It was just shot, and it was a pain in the butt to replace. They're on the side of the road by Lowe's. I had to grind some
Yeah.
stuff off, do
Ooh.
all this stuff, and it was just the factory CV. Um, and she had a leveling kit. She wasn't sure how much. So anyway, it was sounding kind of weird again. So they replaced that. They came back. And she says, sounded kind of weird. She went and looked under and she saw grease was being slung all over. The boot was tore, blah, blah, blah. So our
Yeah.
guys went in and looked at it. And when they gave her the estimate to do the repairs, and her tires are cupping,
Right.
and she was like, "What? Though there shouldn't be that much." And they're like, "No, no, no, no. You do not want to put those stock ones back on because of the angle of everything. Because you have a lift on your vehicle
Yeah.
now, it
Exactly.
changes
There's
the geometry angle."
like those are all the indicators of a poorly installed lift kit.
Right.
Drive shaft joints going bad, tires cupping. It was
Yep.
probably the shocks were probably shot or something else, maybe misaligned or something, and that's why the tires were cupping, which will ruin a tire quick. I've
Oh
had that
yeah,
problem on 2 different Jeeps, and you don't realize it's happening until it's happened,
it's too late.
unless you're really watching.
No, that happened to mine.
There it went, I kicked the
Yep.
fender.
So you really got to write everything down, type everything in and just
Yeah,
really think about what you're doing and how it's going to affect certain things.
and a really important piece that I wanna make sure I cover at the open here is think about the skills that are gonna be required to get the project done, and can you do them?
Hmm.
And be honest with yourself. Right? Because if it's like, oh, in phase 3 I need to be able to do this welding thing. And I've never touched a welder before in my life, but I'm sure I'll figure it out in step 3. Think again.
Right.
Right? Or whatever, right? Maybe it's paint. I'm thinking about painting this and I'm really worried about getting it right because I've never painted a vehicle before. I've painted pieces, I've painted parts, I've never painted a whole vehicle. And I don't know if I can do it. We're going to find out, but I'm prepared to accept the consequences if I get it wrong. Especially since this is an off-roader and the paint's going to get beat up anyway.
Right.
But it goes for any skill. Have you never installed a lift kit before? Maybe installing a lift kit is the bad first project for you.
Right.
So, yeah, just things to think about.
Especially if you've never done that kind of stuff
Yeah, if
before.
I run across this all the time in like message forums and stuff, and you can tell by the way the questions they're asking, they've never really done a lot of work to a vehicle,
Right.
but they see how expensive a lift kit is, and they see how expensive the install job is, and they're asking, "Can I do this myself at home?" And I'm never one to make assumptions for people and say, "No, you absolutely can't." But I'm realistic too, right? I'll try to advise them like, "Look, have you done anything like this before? Do you have a friend who has? Like, do you have someone who can help you through it?" Right? Because if not, you may end up really regretting this project.
And the other thing about that too is we find this at the shop a lot is people like go on Amazon and buy some of these like, oh, it was only $50.
Right.
You know, buy once, cry once. You know, if you spent that much money on your vehicle, I mean, you got to really think about what you're going to do with that vehicle and where you're going to try to save money.
Yeah, I
Because we're
mean,
all trying to save money, but there's certain things you should not go cheap.
there are deals to be had if you know what you're doing and you know exactly what you're getting into and you know either how you're going to accommodate for it or that the part you're buying is in fact quality, right?
Right.
But the average buyer, if something that appears to be the same is 50% cheaper over there, there's probably a reason.
Right.
And it's not because they're kind and want to charge you less. It never is.
Right.
So, yes, that's a valid point. But this actually brings us to the next point I wanted to cover, which is don't be afraid to ask other people for maybe not necessarily help, because obviously you can if you have friends that can help you. That's never a bad thing. But ask their opinions, right? Are and this is what I was referring to earlier. Are you the first person to ever do this particular thing that you're about to do?
Correct.
Chances are probably not. It's a very broad internet. People have done a lot of crazy things with their off-road vehicles. You're probably not the first person to try this thing. But if you are, you should ask yourself why. And I mean, like, really think about why. Why has no
Right.
one else done this?
Right.
It could be that you have a very specific uh, opinion of how a thing should be done, and you're not necessarily wrong, right? And just no one else has thought of it, or no one else thought to go that direction. That is possible. Usually, it's that other people have thought about it and decided it was a bad idea. And if other people thought it was a bad idea, you should try to figure out why. Like why what did they think about that you're not? And if that identifies a thing that you're willing to live with or that you're willing to try to work around, then you've gone in with your eyes open. But if people are telling you this is a bad idea and it sounds like they have good reasons, maybe you shouldn't do it. The
Mhm.
YJ Grill, I found very few people with any interest in doing it, and I made the decision to try it anyway. But that's because I think most people don't want to do it, not because it's a bad idea. Maybe it's a
It's a
bad
lot
idea to
of
people who
work.
don't want to do it, right? It is a lot of
A
work.
lot of work.
It's a lot of work, and it gives you a look that is probably the least popular Wrangler look out there,
The square people
right?
have they don't like the square headlights. Some
Yeah,
people really, really love them.
and
And
I'm one of
then
those people, so
yeah,
that's why
I
I
do
want to do
too.
it, right?
The
So that's
YJ
a good example.
is a great little Jeep.
That's a good example of no one's done it, or not a lot of people have done it. People would probably tell me not to do it because it's a lot of work, but I've chosen to do it anyway because I'm going in with my eyes open, right? But if it's like I found this oddball axle in a in a junkyard, and it looks like a good idea, but everyone says it's a bad idea, but I'm going to do it anyway, you're probably going to regret that later. Because you won't find aftermarket parts for it, or you'll find that there's a weak point that everyone else knew about that you didn't bother to look into, right? That kind of thing. But it was a great deal, right?
Yeah.
So, all important things to think about when you're getting into a project. Let's see.
I've
You have any-
lost track where you are.
I was in the getting
You go.
opinions from others part
Oh,
here.
yeah. Okay.
All right. Try not to get overwhelmed is my next point, and this happens to me quite a lot. this thing, once I got the fenders off, there's a million nuts and bolts everywhere. There's a million little doodads that had to get unplugged or taken out of their sockets or disconnected and set on the workbench. And
Label
Yeah.
them all as you're doing it.
I always get worried that this thing is not going to go back together the way I took it apart. Right.
Or you're going
And
to
in
have extra parts.
and in this case, I'm extra worried because a lot of this stuff mounted to the old fenders. And when the new fenders go in,
where are you
it's
gonna,
all
you're,
going to be different.
you're going to have to. So this happens when we do custom Jeep builds.
Mhm.
On the Wranglers, there's a lot of Wranglers. We do custom Jeep builds. And we end up like, oh, where are we going to put this? Or how are we going to do this? And
Yeah.
we make a lot of custom made brackets
Yeah.
to do some of this stuff. So
I
that's
may end
probably
up,
what you're going
yeah.
to have to do that.
But things like the windshield washer reservoir, right?
Oh, yeah.
That thing is custom molded to fit exactly where it was on the fender, the stock fender of the Jeep. The new fender looks nothing like the old fender.
Right.
Where am I going to put this thing?
A squirt bottle inside
Yeah.
your Jeep.
Well, it turns out performance automotive places make replacement reservoirs for just this case, right? So you can buy a reservoir and buy a motor for it and plug it in and, off you go.
I think we have something on our website too for that. A washer. Fluid washer thing. Washer fluid.
From what I'm reading, Molnar, who made the fenders, he figured out a place to put the reservoir. So we'll find out if I can put it where he puts it once I get the fenders together. But that's the sort of thing where once you've got everything apart and all the pieces are laying all over your shop, and you're not sure how it's going to go back together, it can be a really bad feeling. And there have been days where I'm down here working and I get to a point where it's like, I've still got time left in the day. I could still do more work, but I'm looking at the next 3 things and I just can't decide what the right next step is.
Right.
Right. When I was doing those, the bars I was talking about, the support bars that go to the top of the grill.
Right.
I'm like obsessing over, is the grill at the right angle? Is the grill in the right position? Because once I drill these holes where I'm going to put these bars, then I only have like a half an inch of wiggle room to move it back and forth. Am I going to drill these holes and regret it later? And I couldn't bring myself to drill the holes because I'm looking at it and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if it's right. And it turned out the answer to that was get the fenders out of the box, get them mocked up, see where everything lands, and see if it looks like it's in the right ballpark or not. So, but what I had to do was step away from it. And like 2 days later, I came back and decided that was the thing to do. And that's what I did. And I made a bunch of progress just yesterday because I finally got past that.
And you could be like laying in bed at night, like, oh,
right.
Well, and that's with any project, anything you do.
Right.
Sometimes you've got to step away.
But
and one thing,
don't be afraid to stop and take your time, I think is my point.
And one thing that for me, when I left Colorado and my life was like, oh, at the worst possible place I could be, I was like, how am I going to get out of this hole I was in?
Yeah.
And a friend of mine, which
that's an
ironic.
even worse feeling.
Yeah. And
that's so much worse than what angle is my grill at, because I can walk away from the grill and come back whenever I want.
Funny, Dave, who's in the chat room, he Martha and Adam are my friends. Martha told me, Tammy, you have to break it down into little itty bitty steps. What is it going to take for you to get out of this hole? Well, first I need, whatever. And I did. I broke it down and she saved me just by little itty bitty baby steps to get out of the hole or to finish your project. You're like, oh my God, this is overwhelming. Stop. What is the first thing that you need to do?
Yes. What is the next thing?
Right.
I heard this summarized somewhere. What is the next right thing? I think it was the word it went. What's the next right thing to do?
Right.
Yeah.
Instead of looking at like, oh my gosh, I need to get my own place, or I need to move, or I need to find my new town.
You look too far down the road and it's like, but I
Right.
can't afford any of that. How am I
Right.
supposed to get that? Well, obviously, then the first step
First step
is
is get
how
a
do you
job.
afford it?
Right. Get a
Right.
job.
Right. Right.
And even that is overwhelming as someone who's had a hole in their resume, who doesn't have a job, like,
Yeah. No,
okay,
I can understand that.
then you gotta break that step down into a little itty bitty steps.
I
So,
with the job market the way it is, I had a friend that I have a friend, I should say, that got laid off. His last day was today. Works at the same
oh,
place I work at. And I feel bad for him because the job
mhm,
market is like horrible. And he's a good guy. He's got some skills, but I think even still he's gonna have trouble finding a job,
mhm,
right? It just reminded me of that when you said about getting a job.
yeah. So,
But it's sometimes
anyway,
it's not you or your resume, it's the job market. Can you find a
yeah,
job that pays what you need? That's willing to hire you, that somebody else didn't just snap up for half your salary because they can afford to take less,
right.
you know?
So little baby steps.
Yep. Yep. And that's part of what I meant when I said at the beginning to break your project up into pieces, right? And try to just, what do I have to do to get to that next phase? And then line up the steps
Mhm.
and get those steps one by one. If you have to write them down on a piece of cardboard like they do on the off-road shows and cross them off as you go, if that's how you work, and do it. I like to use tools on my online tools that'll do like you could do like a Kanban board, or you can do like an actual project management piece of software. They work really well for this stuff. That's exactly what they're for, right? You can find free tools out there, or use a spreadsheet, use a piece of paper. I don't care, whatever works for you. Use a Word doc.
Post-its.
Post-it notes. That's exactly what a Kanban
Yeah,
board is supposed to
I
emulate.
love
Post-it notes.
Post-its.
So, all right. We got 7 minutes till the end of the show. So let's try to get through. So try not to get overwhelmed. Oh, the other thing I do, you know those Ziploc snack bags that you like put cookies for your kid in?
Put your bolts in, say, "Hey,
I
this is
I
the
keep a box of
fender." Yeah,
them right in the cabinet up over here.
yeah.
And whenever I'm working on something like this, where I have all these little miscellaneous pieces, I'll take the bag and I'll write on it with a Sharpie where these came from, and I'll stick them in the bag.
Mhm.
And then the next thing I take apart, I'll put them all in a bag and write on a Sharpie where they came from. And then when I'm putting it back together again, I can be like, these are the bolts that have to fit somewhere on there. Figure it out.
The guys in the shop do that, like, Daniel does that when he's taking apart an engine, and then
Oh yeah, an engine, exactly.
mhm,
That's actually the first time I did this was when I was doing the valve cover gasket and the oil pan gasket on the 4.0, because I'm taking off the fender so I can get to the engine, because I needed to be able to get the exhaust off, I think, and that's blocked by the fender. And I'm like, if I take the fender off, it'll be easier. And then I'm like, look at all the crap that I have to take off of this fender. And that's when I started with the bag idea. So
mhm,
yeah, I can totally understand that.
yep.
All right, let's see here. Don't cut corners to save time. This has
Nope.
bit me more times than I can count, because I can't tell you the number of times where I'm looking at a project and I'm like, does it really need the third coat of paint? It looks pretty good with just two. And then you get it out on the trail and the
You're
paint
like,
starts to chip off.
"Oh,
And you're
yeah."
like, I should have put the third coat on.
Yes. Yep. I can attest to stuff like that, and I don't know how to
Yeah.
bring so and it wasn't me that did this, it was somebody else who was working on my Jeep, who shall remain nameless. They put my axle truss on, and they decided not to do it completely, and like, "Oh, let's just leave the bottom parts off because you don't need that. Now it's just this hunk of metal on my axle." And, "Oh, the adjustable control arms are on."
Look on the
And
bright side, Tammy. If you're ever in a flood, your Jeep will be that much heavier. It'll stick to
I
the road
know,
better.
I know. Um, and they didn't paint. The adjustable control arms needed to be painted. They are
Yeah.
bare metal. You should see them
Yeah.
now. And the truss is bare metal. Okay, and so
With
this goes back to baby steps. I had a
yeah.
lot of stuff to be done on my Jeep, so you just need to be patient when you got the money to do the next step. The
Yeah.
axle will
And
be there.
believe me, I get it, especially when these things are your daily driver. That's sometimes really hard.
Yeah,
You're like, I've got a weekend to get this project done. Otherwise, I don't get to work on Monday.
right.
Sometimes that's a really hard thing to have to accept. Like, well, guess I'm calling a
Yep,
friend. We're carpooling tomorrow
yep.
because this ain't gonna work it's not going to work right if I rush it now. So that's a difficult one to swallow sometimes. But you were saying about paint with the grill, I had to extend the bottom of it a little bit, and to get that bracketry that was from the TJ grill onto the bottom of it. Watch the video if you don't know what I'm talking about. I can put a link in the description. But as I'm putting it together, I'm like, these are going to be really hard to get to with paint later. So I stopped right there. I went on Amazon. I ordered a can of Steal It, and I waited for it to come because I knew I was going to have to weld on this stuff.
Steal It? What's Steal It?
Steal It is a weld through primer.
Oh.
So you can prime the part, and then you can still weld over top of the primer. So I went and got a can of that, and I painted everything good that I knew was going to be hard to get to later with Steal It, and then I welded it up. And I think I'm going to be happy for that later when the thing doesn't rust to pieces, because there's going to be spots I can't paint.
Right.
That I'm not going to be able to reach. There's like overlap in the sheet metal where I like welded across the overlap, and there's a section under the overlap that moisture will be able to get into, especially off road, but paint won't. I ain't gonna get paint in there.
Right.
So, I think I'll be happy I did that later. But that's another example where I had to stop for the day, and I probably did some other little jobs that could have gotten done that day, but I couldn't do the thing I wanted to get done that day because I had to stop and wait for the Steal It to come because I couldn't buy it local. I didn't know anywhere to get it. So anyway, let's see. Oh, this is going to be a little controversial. Yeah. Controversial. So you see, can't speak tonight. Share your project. Put it online. Show your progress. Let people see it. People that have done these sort of projects before. The number of times that I was in a project that it was new to me, but I had a good idea of what I was doing, where I've shared a picture with a friend or shared it in a group, and someone's like, hey, that right there, that's a problem. And you might feel bad that you shared this thing you were so proud of.
Right.
And someone's saying that thing right there is wrong. But it could save your butt later.
Right.
Because if you didn't know, if you never found out that was wrong and you went on with the project, it might be a lot harder to fix later. It could be unsafe later. Depends what you're doing. It might just look bad later. It might rust through later, like the thing with the Steal It, right? If I wouldn't have stopped and thought about that, and then later someone's like, you should have put Steal It on that. Too late now. What am I going to do? Cut the whole thing apart and paint it? You know
right.
What I mean? So
there's also another side to that too. You got to be careful. There's a lot of people out there who, like, I post reels and stuff, and they're like, "Oh, that's not true. You don't have to do that." So if some stranger is like criticizing you or saying, "Oh, that's wrong," if it's somebody you don't trust, find someone who you do trust and say, "Hey, this guy said," because that happens to me all the time when I post reels. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this guy is saying this," and I go back to my mechanics, and they're like, "Don't listen to them. They don't know what they're talking about."
Right. Or it's their opinion.
Correct.
Right? Because there's lots of things in this off-road community that are 100% based on opinion. This thing worked really well for me, therefore it is the God's honest truth. And that person may believe it is the truth. Because for them, it's the truth.
Right.
It doesn't mean it's the only way to get it done.
Yeah, I had a reel about Daniel was cleaning the corrosion off the battery terminals, and I forget what he used. I can't remember. Anyway,
did he pour a can of Coke on it or something?
I've seen that. If it was Coke, yeah, but whatever he used, I don't remember. I'll have to look it up. People are like, "That's not how you do it."
Oh, well, whatever, it worked.
Right. So
right way or not, it worked.
You gotta be careful there too. So, but you're right, and you do have to really stop and like,
some people will just tear you down because they want to tear you down.
Right.
I had shared, it was the Dana 60, the one that I narrowed.
Right.
I had shared the progress in, I think, one of the TJ groups that I'm in, just saying like, this is what I'm working on, and here's the one I narrowed. And this one guy, I had a couple people say, "Why'd you narrow it?" Because that's one of those things that a lot of people don't do. And it's one of those things that if you're narrowing a Dana 60, you have to understand why you're doing it, right? And you have to have a reason for doing it. Otherwise, it's a lot of work for not a lot of benefit, right? Like I have, by narrowing that 60, made it a little bit less stable on road, or even on the trail, right? Because it's a couple inches narrower, and narrower means it doesn't have the stability that it would have had at the full width. I've also made it so that I'm going to have to think more about clearance for the tires when they turn, right? At full lock, are they going to hit the frame now? And these are things I've thought through that I'm going to deal with when I get to them. But this guy, and a couple of people said, hey, these are things you're going to have to think about. And that's all valid feedback. But this one guy, he's like, you ruined the axle by narrowing it.
Mhm.
And I'm like, well, I don't think I did. And here's why. You ruined the axle by narrowing it. I'm like, well, the park I wheel at, it's pretty narrow. I didn't really want a full width axle. My trailer clearance, right? Like the fenders are certain size, and I really wanted to be able to clear those without having to drive over them. And I listed all the reasons why I narrowed it. And he's like, you're going to regret it. You've ruined the axle. He just wouldn't accept it.
Right.
And no matter what I told him, all he wanted to do was belittle me for narrowing
And
this axle.
and not giving you a reason. How
Well, he gave me reasons, and there are
Oh.
reasons that I understood. There are reasons
Right.
that I knew, and I accepted. But he couldn't accept the fact that I had a different use case than him, right? I ended up having to block him because he was getting that mean. Right? It's like, I don't
Jeez.
block a lot of people.
It's not your problem, sir.
Yeah, it's like, okay, buddy, I'm
Right.
not forcing you to use this axle.
Right.
How about you just accept that
You're
I'm
not-
wrong and you're right, and
you're
someday
not
I'll come to
paying the
regret
bills.
it.
You're not paying the bill for this build.
Exactly. My build, not yours.
Mhm.
Some people are just crazy.
Yeah.
I haven't been watching the chat. I did notice that Videos got my thing right.
Yeah, he did.
Push the
I
button,
knew
Frank.
he would. I knew he would.
Yep. That is TV's Frank from Mystery
Never.
Science Theater 3000.
Never heard of it.
You ever watch an old movie with a bunch of your friends and make fun of it?
I watched Jaws with my kids, and I said, "This is the scariest movie of all time. You got to watch it."
Yeah.
And they made fun of it. And as I'm watching it, I'm like, "Oh my god,
This
yeah,
is terrible,
this is
isn't it?
lame." Yeah.
Yeah, well, Mystery Science Theater 3000, they watch a bunch of old science fiction movies, like really cheesy science fiction movies. Like, did you know that there was a Chinese, or Japanese maybe? Like there's all these big monster movies from,
Yeah.
well,
Godzilla.
there was one that's a giant turtle. His name's Gamera. You know how I know that? Because I saw it on Mystery Science Theater 3000. But there's three guys that sit in the front row and just make fun of the movies. And that's what makes it fun, because you get to see these old classic movies and these guys in the front making jokes about it. It's hilarious. You should check it out.
I will have to look it up.
You all should check it out. These guys had such a following that they were on the Sci-Fi Channel like back in the 90s. And they ran for, I don't know, 14 seasons or something. It ran for a long time.
Wow.
And then they finally got canceled. And Netflix picked it up. And there was a couple seasons under the same name of Mystery Science Theater 3000 with different cast. And it was kind of funny, but it didn't quite fit the same. It didn't have the same feel, right? The guys who did the original series now make audio tracks that you can play along with modern movies. So you basically like pop this in, I don't know if they're digital or if they're on CDs or whatever, but you pop it in something that can play it, and you play it while you're watching like Twilight. And they're making fun of Twilight. They call them riff tracks now.
So I just rolled my eyes at Video's comment, and I'm rolling my eyes at you, Nate.
I'm not looking at it. But, because I'm going on about Gamera.
Yeah.
Gamera is really neat. Gamera is full of meat. Yes.
All right, folks. Yeah, this is the Off-Road Insiders podcast. We are everywhere where you can find podcasts. We have we're on Facebook. You can catch us there. And if you're watching on Jeep Mama's, that's me, YouTube channel, or Nate's YouTube channel, SWB Crawler, please go to Off-Road Insiders podcast on YouTube and subscribe to us there. We would really appreciate it. And if you guys have any great ideas for any podcasts you want us to talk about, you can email us or you can share it in the comments. We're we're open to if anybody has anybody that we think you think we should interview. We did get this guy who wrote a book.
Yeah, we gotta
I don't know.
circle back with him and figure
Yeah.
out
So
how we're doing that.
And eventually we're gonna have the road chose me.
Yep. You've reached out to Dan Greg. He said that's gonna be like
June.
So that's a little ways off.
It seems like a little ways off, but I guarantee you, it's all of a sudden, oh my gosh, it's
It'll be like, whoa,
summertime.
it's June.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
And anyone who's listening from Cheyenne, March 6th, they're going to announce the Frontier Day concerts. We have 5 or 6, or no, a whole bunch. I don't know, maybe more than that, concerts in a row, like big name people. So I'm excited for that.
Cool.
So,
well, I think that's it for tonight, folks. If you didn't know this already, the role of Mystery Science Theater 3000. But this has been the Off-Road Insiders Podcast. I hope you guys have had a great time. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, whatever you're doing, and we will catch you next time.
have a great week.